Good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon's proceedings are going to be live streamed with the usual 10-minute delay. Those with mobile devices may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 10 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for recording or photography. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hastings, I'd like to ask you about your understanding of the relevant legislation around your deployment. You say in your witness statement at paragraph 38 that you had a vague understanding of RIPA and the Human Rights Act, but no recollection of any training. Did you have SB training prior to joining the SDS in relation to those pieces of legislation?
Not that I recall.
Did you have an understanding about necessity, the legal principle of necessity in the undercover context?
I think as my statement says, I don't recall being advised on that.
At paragraph 38, do you say you have a vague understanding of RIPA and the Human Rights Act? We can check that.
And then go on to say, I have no recollection of receiving any training or guidance. I do not recall being advised on the proportionality, legality, accountability and necessity of my deployment in line with RIPA and the Human Rights Act, HRI.
Yeah. And my question to you is, did you have given that you have a vague understanding of RIPA and the Human Rights Act, did you have an understanding of necessity in the undercover context?
No.
What about proportionality and legality?
No.
Do you recall attending a meeting and being asked to sit an assessment in relation to RIPA?
I believe, as my statement says, I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And what was the purpose of that?
I don't know. It was instigated by
DCI Flood, I think you
DCI
said in
Flood,
your
yeah.
statement. Was there a requirement that you needed to be familiar with those documents?
It wasn't. There were no documents. I think, if I recall correctly, it was no more than a questionnaire that was handed to us, and we were expected to, by way of a short exam, I think, and we were expected to just complete it.
But there had been no requirement for you to be familiar with the RIPA and Human Rights Act documents before that?
No.
You say in your witness statement to paragraph 43, in hindsight, I do not consider that training and guidance received was adequate as it did not address the breadth of potential consequences of immersing yourself within a totally different culture and living a different life. What did you mean about the consequences?
The complete impact of being a UC in its totality on your life. As I say, I don't think there was. I mean, arguably there's a question there as to, is there any training that you could be given that could potentially prepare you for the impact of being a UCO?
But the consequences you were concerned with were those on you personally.
My family.
What about the consequences on those you were infiltrating?
The likelihood is that I wouldn't have considered that at the time.
The legislation is obviously there to protect the public, but is it right then that you had no working knowledge of the legal framework around your deployment?
I would say that I had a vague understanding, as indicated, but I didn't know the legislation, the necessary legislation in detail.
Okay, but what the principles? You said you didn't really understand what necessity, proportionality, those sorts of things.
No, that's not quite true. What I would say is that proportionality, legality are principles that are applied within policing generally. So they're not specific, obviously, to RIPA or RIPA. So obviously within the context of my policing career, those would have been general principles that I would have applied, but that was a non-UC context.
So not in the context of infiltrating people's private lives?
Certainly.
And so in that sense, is it fair to say that the public were not protected from the scope of your deployment in the way that they might have been had you been familiar with those principles in your undercover deployment?
Possibly.
And was that a failing, do you say, on the part of management for not enforcing that and highlighting that with you? Or is that a failure on your part for not inquiring more about that and ensuring that you knew what you needed to know for your role?
I think it would be fair and appropriate to say that perhaps both.
Were you at any time given a sense of the thresholds of gravity of potential offending or disorder that you were to report on? And by that I mean in RIPA, serious crime is an offence for which a person who has attained the age of 21 and has no previous convictions could reasonably be expected to be sentenced to imprisonment for a term of 3 years or more.
Well, I wasn't reporting on crime, as I've indicated. I was very much an intelligence gatherer, but no, specifically I wouldn't have considered that.
Did you have any consideration as to what your powers were when on duty undercover to enter private property?
No.
What about stay overnight in someone's home?
No.
What about search through people's property,
No.
bags or correspondence?
No.
One example of specific reporting is at MPS 006 4424 is behind tab C47, sir, of bundle 4. You can have that up on screen. It's in relation to somebody being in receipt of income support, a member of ISM. You note how much a week income support this person gets and that it's paid into a post office account, and the number is printed there, the full post office account number,
Yeah.
which has been redacted. How did you come about that information?
I can't recall.
Can it be assumed, though, that you had seen that written down, or
Either seen it written down or committed it to memory at the time.
and is that a person has said to you, I get this amount of money and it gets paid into this post office account, this is the number? Does that seem likely, or is it more likely that you've found that document?
No, as I said, I don't recall how I came by this information.
Did you look at people's correspondence or search people's homes when you were
No.
there?
No.
Did you search people's bags when you were in their company?
No.
Did you give any consideration to people's Article 8 rights to privacy
No.
under the Human Rights Act? In a review of your deployment in April 2007, there's reference to collateral intrusion. Can I have up on screen, please, MPS 007 3308. It's behind tab B83 of bundle 3. So this is a review of your deployment. Page 4, please. The reference to collateral intrusion in box 2. Says there have been no instances of collateral intrusion. Focused tasking and briefings will continue in an effort to minimise any such intrusion. Collateral intrusion is inevitable, particularly in areas that consistently attract eccentric but well-intentioned persons. But CW, Commonweal, is tightly focused on those individuals planning antisocial and serious manifestations of public dissent and disorder. So, your evidence so far is that you didn't really have a sense of boundaries. By April 2007, when this document is being authored, had you got a sense of collateral intrusion and that you were focused on those individuals, only those planning antisocial behaviour?
Well, I think if we look at the first page of this particular document, it's authored by DCI Flood. I have no idea what DCI Flood means by what he's written here.
Is that a true reflection, though, of how you conducted your deployment?
I can't comment on that.
In your witness statement at paragraph 70, you talk about collateral intrusion You say that it was never discussed, no guidance around that. Is that correct?
Yes, as I've said.
And you understood that you should focus reporting on individuals and groups I was connected to. Is it fair to say that that wording is quite different to the wording on this document, that you were focused on reporting on individuals that you were connected to, as opposed to reporting on individuals planning antisocial and serious manifestations of public dissent and disorder?
I mean, it could be both, because certainly I'd been involved in individuals who'd planned large-scale, or rather, relatively speaking, large-scale demonstrations in London.
You're saying that they're similar
Similar
approaches?
I think that there is a relationship between the two.
Do you accept, though, that yours was much broader?
Yes.
In terms of reporting on Islamic terrorism, and as you've said, those people who might try and use ISM to facilitate that sort of objective, how did you plan to identify those individuals? Did you have any training on that as to what to look out for?
No, not specifically.
Can we have a look at some of your reporting now, please? Moving on to your actual reports, or those that have been sanitised for you by back office. The first is MPS 0039548. And this is the first report that we have for you through the inquiry. It's to do with the US election results. Now, why did you consider this was important, a meeting at the Friends Meeting House?
I think I would have reported that because of the attendance of George Galloway.
And were MPs, as far as you were concerned, fair game for reporting on?
I would have regarded George Galloway as being someone that I would have reported on.
Why?
Because of his involvement, his long-standing involvement as an activist with a particular left-wing bent.
Did you have any guidance on the limits of reporting on politicians?
No.
The next document, please, is MPS 0039660. It's behind tab C2, so in bundle 4. And this is a report of 17th of November 2004. And it appears to be one of the first reports you make in relation to ISM. And it's the Rampart street door entry code. So Rampart, was that like a social venue?
So Rampart at the time was located in East London, and it was a squat, for want of a better term, that was could be used by activists and other groups to hold meetings, social events.
And did you attend there fairly regularly?
Over the course of my deployment, yes.
There was an ISM training weekend, according to this report, over the weekend of the 13th to the 14th of November 2004. Did you attend that training weekend?
That's not come up, sorry.
Is it not? Just in the main report.
I've still got the ISM Rampart Street Door entry code in front of me.
Yeah, and so in the box just below that...
I can't see the box below, I'm afraid.
Right, okay. Has that come up now? So in the main report, the door access code for the Rampart Street Centre.
Yeah.
And it was used for an ISM training weekend.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
And did you attend that training weekend?
Yes.
Did that touch at all on Islamic terrorist activity?
No, it was concerned with things that activists should consider were they to travel to Israel and the likelihood of the questions they would be asked at the borders.
And that training took place almost monthly, is that right?
I can't recall.
How many training sessions did you attend?
In relation to this, I believe this I attended as someone who was fairly new to the organisation. I may have attended other events subsequent to that as a member of ISM, someone who didn't necessarily need to go through the training again.
Okay. But generally, the whole training was about legitimate actions of travelling out to Palestine, is that right?
I would say it was about things that people should consider if they travel to Israel, Palestine, the occupied territories.
But no whiff of people taking on terrorist activity?
Well, at that time, I wouldn't have been in a position to comment on that. I didn't know what people's intentions were. They were going to training.
Why report on the door access code?
My view on that would have been that that was information that was likely, in all likelihood, not known to Special Branch, and so therefore it might potentially be of use to Special Branch.
For access to them?
For them to use in any way they saw fit.
Was any feedback given to you about reporting things like that?
Not that I recall.
The next report is MPS 0039725 behind tab C3, bundle 4. And this is a report of the 30th of November 2004.
Sorry, it doesn't appear to have come up.
That's all right. 0039752.
So 13th, 11th, 2004.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a report about somebody being deported from Israel, and we can see that there's a suggestion that there should be internal security within the ISM.
Well, I would have reported exactly what I heard.
Was there significant internal security within the ISM?
At that time, I wouldn't have been able to comment.
Did you join the ISM quite easily?
One doesn't join an organisation like the ISM. It's, as is often the case with anarchist groups, it's often by way of association.
And how easy was it for you to associate and attend these meetings?
Well, I certainly attended the training event, and from then I then went on to develop friendships with the members of the group and become more involved and attend more meetings. In terms of ease, I don't know if they undertook any security checks against me, for example, but was it particularly difficult? I personally didn't find it that difficult.
And why did you think that Special Branch would be interested in this person in particular?
Well, you're looking at an individual who claims to have travelled to Israel and claims to have been deported. This is an individual who perhaps then may be of interest to Special Branch because of their interests and maybe perhaps what they may or may not be doing.
But all speculative at the time?
Yes, but that's the nature of intelligence. It's very much about forward, as much as about events that have taken place, it can also be in terms of forward thinking.
The next report, please, MPS 0040147. It's behind tab B41 in bundle 2. And this is an example of a composite raw report. Is this your own reporting? Did you author this document?
That's possible.
Is this how you would present your reports to the back office, and then they would type these up in sterilised reports?
Well, I would pass on information to the back office, and it would then be up to the officer to consider how they would then sanitise the report, how they would break down reports into particular lines, or how they would separate elements contained within the information that I'd provided.
The third paragraph is in relation to an ISM vigil held outside Downing Street to commemorate the death of ISM activist Tom Herndl. And he was a young man that was shot on the 11th of April 2003 by an Israeli soldier in Rafah. And is it right that we've heard evidence that he was actually trying to help clear children from the path of Israeli snipers at the time when he was shot?
I don't know. I can't comment on that.
You were there at the vigil, is that right?
I was at the vigil, yes.
And that was an event where there was no public disorder?
There was a quiet gathering, as I recall, of ISM activists. As I say, it was a commemoration of Tom Handel.
So no crime or public order to report?
No, but certainly part of the activity of ISM.
And it has details of Mr. Handel's treatment in hospital?
Yes.
And why was that of importance for you to include in the report?
I would have seen that, presumably, as providing further context to the reporting. So I would have provided as much information as possible that was available to me.
This is post-event. How could that have been of interest to Special Branch?
Because it involved ISM.
Okay, that was the criteria.
Absolutely, yes.
Was this, I think you say this was the first event where you met Atif Chowdhury?
I believe so, yes.
Could it be that you met him previously at a party hosted by Charlotte Carson, at a house party before that, which is Atif Chowdhury's evidence?
I'm not certain. My specific recollection of meeting Atif for the first time was at the vigil, and the reason I recall that is because he was carrying a bag of, I believe, clementines. For some reason, that stuck in my brain.
Sorry, what was he carrying a bag of?
I believe a bag of clementines.
Oh. And that was here at this vigil?
I believe so.
And how would you have described him when you first met him?
Circumspect. Not particularly given to opening up initially. Possibly quite wary. Wasn't immediately welcoming or open, if I recall.
Can we look at paragraphs 5 and 6 of this document, please? You give a physical description of him. Was it important at the time to record race? You
Yes.
described IC4, and what was the purpose of that?
Simply because within the policing environment, in order to be able to identify an individual, there are I don't know if they've changed it, but there were certainly codes in place that were used by police to help define or to identify individuals according to racial categories.
He has described himself as being withdrawing from activism or taking a break from ISM, and you report that. So from a very early stage, were you aware that he was not really that engaged with ISM, say, for fundraising?
I think the issue here is that he may have claimed that, but I certainly wasn't in a position to confirm that to be true.
Did that fairly quickly become apparent to you as soon as you started spending time with him?
Not really, no. No.
In what way?
Well, Atif was involved with, I think, an olive oil company, where the proceeds of which I think were made available to individuals within Palestine.
So he's engaged in fundraising events, but primarily this is a British citizen, businessman who's involved in grassroots community business initiatives. Is that right?
Well, he might describe it like that.
Would you not describe him like
I would
that?
describe him as someone who was within the orbit of the ISM, therefore he was of interest to me.
In terms of the company that he established, Zaytoon, that organisation, was that something that you thought was a legitimate target for reporting on?
Zaytoon was not a target for me, but certainly his involvement with it would have been. It would have been part of the general intelligence picture as to the individual, what they were involved in, what their interests were, including business.
And so you thought it was legitimate to report on the ins and outs of the business itself, did you?
Insofar as any activity that he undertook in relation to this, I would have reported on.
Just while we're on this document, page 2, paragraph 5. There's reference to a few other initiatives as well. We've got emails from the organisation Global Resistance. Have highlighted a few more events. So is this, to the extent that you can recall, did you report on globalised resistance through email activity? You had access to...
This looks as if it may have come from some generic mailing list of some kind.
Okay, so you were receiving information about them and reporting on them to that extent?
No, I didn't. To the extent that I was not deployed to report against globalised resistance, certainly. But then this has come up, and I knew that they were an organisation that the special branch at that time had a very keen interest in. So if that had come across, then I would have just put it in as a matter of course.
So just a matter of course because it touches on left-wing activity?
No, because Special Branch had a specific interest in globalised resistance. I knew that.
Okay. Report number MPS 0041000, please. February 2005 is behind tab C7 of bundle 4. An ISM supporter being involved in a fundraising event for the 18th of March.
Okay.
Fundraising was a big part of the group's activities, is that fair to say?
Certainly they had fundraising activities, yes.
And what did that normally involve?
Well, that was where my role with sound equipment and with DJing was of some use to them.
And so you would often DJ at events and that
would
would be
organise
part
events
of the fundraising?
that would then obviously generate income.
And do you know how much you used to generate?
No.
Report number MPS 0041092 behind tab C8. Is a report on an ISM activist. A description there. And the fact that he may have a daughter about 10 years old. Why was that important to report?
Because in the context of the individual, it may have been information that would have helped identify him as far as desk officers were concerned at SB.
No sense of not reporting on children at all? Next report, MPS 0041817. 24th of March 2005, about a collective art, music, politic. It says that it's a collective of about 3 people, the purpose of which is to organise and coordinate social events with a specifically political dimension. Again, was it your impression at the time that you had to report on anything that had to do with political activity?
Well, yes, because also I think I was aware of the location, so yes, that I would have just reported on because of the political element to it.
MPS 0041332 behind tab C14 is a report on Charlotte Carson and her contact with Atif Chowdhury. She's a keen supporter of Zaytoon, a company that distributes in the UK. These are all legitimate activities, nothing to do with public disorder or criminal enterprise. Is that right?
Again, it's the reason this would have been reported by me would be part of the larger intelligence picture that could then be developed by the officers at NSY.
save to do with fundraising. Did Atif Chowdhury strike you as somebody that was very much involved in planning any events that would lead to disorder?
No.
And by now, in March 2005, you've been in the field for some time. Was there any sense that what people like Charlotte and Atif were up to was of anything other than what can be seen as legitimate activity supporting Palestinian rights in Gaza and other places?
Again, I make the point, they are part of ISM, and I'm still reporting on them because of the fact we're not sure who's going through, who may be coming through ISM.
The next report, MPS 0041329. Behind tab C12 of Bundle 4. The two, again, Gus is somebody that you're reporting on, and he has a daughter.
Yes.
The 10-year-old daughter. You've reported both the fact that he claims to be in receipt of disability allowance and also her name. Was there any specific reason for that?
Because if previously, depending on when these reports were submitted, I don't know the chronology here, but it would have been another means of helping to identify who she was and identifying him.
Why would you need to know who she was?
Because she's his daughter, and it's a mechanism whereby, for example, if you've got two activists and both of them have the name Gus, one of them has a daughter and one doesn't, that extra detail might help into the branch officers in terms of being able to identify that individual in particular.
And you thought that Gus was somebody that was of interest to Special Branch?
Yes.
What was it in particular about this person that you thought Special Branch needed to know about?
As far as I can recall, he was, as I say, involved in ISM, and I believe he may even have travelled out to the territories.
The next report, MPS 0042113, is behind tab C17, is an ISM impromptu demonstration in Cavendish Square on the 13th of April 2005. And it's in relation with War on Want and the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. Supporters of the demonstration are being asked to arrive at midday wearing Caterpillar T-shirts. The Caterpillar T-shirts was a campaign against CAT, the vehicle company, is that right?
Possibly, or maybe even on Caterpillar.
Caterpillar, yeah. And that's because of their involvement in, their supply
construction and demolition, that as identified in Israel, the occupied territories, Palestine.
So they're involved in demolishing Palestinian homes.
I can't say for certain what those vehicles are concerned with, but I know they're used out there.
Okay. And we'll come on to it, but Caterpillar was one of the vehicles that was involved in the death of Rachel Corrie, is that right?
I believe so.
In terms of this report, this is a lawful protest trying to raise awareness about that company, is that right?
It's indicative of the fact that there will be a protest, whether is it lawful? Yes, it would appear so. However, you've got Caterpillar T-shirts, and the line, the organisers then say the event will then make itself clear, suggests to me that there's a potential there for public order disorder.
Although in the comment section it says that it's not thought that this will be a violent event. No numbers were known.
It is not thought that this will be a violent event. That doesn't say with great certainty this will be a non-violent event.
The next report, MPS 0042125, behind tab C19, from the 12th of April 2005. This is in relation to the ISM preparing for a visit to the UK of the parents and sister of Rachel Corrie, and she was the activist killed in Gaza, Palestine, on the 16th of March 2003. She was 23 years old, and she was trying to stand in solidarity and protect Palestinian homes being demolished when she was killed as a result of the movement of a Caterpillar vehicle. Is that right?
That's what you're telling me.
Okay. Were you not aware of that as a member of ISM? It's quite high profile.
Well, I'm aware of the death of Rachel Corrie, yes, and I recall the visit to the UK of her parents, yes, certainly.
And so this is reporting on a grieving family who are coming over to make contact with others who may have known Rachel and spent time with her.
Yes.
And why was that of relevance to Special Branch?
Because it related to the ISM.
Did you meet Rachel's family?
I did, yes.
So did you attend this social that was mentioned in the report?
I did, yes.
And did you have conversations with Rachel's family about Rachel herself?
I don't recall.
In terms of being an undercover officer, was it open to you to avoid an event like this that didn't have any potential for public disorder or criminal activity?
Possibly, but I obviously felt that it was appropriate that I attended.
Why was that?
Because it was the ISM.
A linked report to this is behind tab C40, MPS 006 4124. And it's in reference to the family of Rachel Corrie looking to maybe hire a room in Parliament, and MP Jeremy Corbyn was involved in facilitating that. Again, reference to a member of Parliament doing very legitimate parliamentarian activity. Was there any sense that you shouldn't be reporting on a politician in that way?
At the time, no.
Were you explicitly tasked to monitor the family of Rachel Corrie?
No.
We know that references to Rachel Corrie, preemptive intelligence and a link between Rachel Corrie's family and ISM London were included within the RIPA authorisation documents, which we've had a look at. I don't need to take you, I don't think, to the documents themselves because you weren't familiar with them. But there was no sense, was there, of you being told by back office or management not to report on this family or their movements?
No. I remember discussing my attendance at this event with another officer and how I felt having attended the event.
Is that an officer who is an open officer? Can you tell us his name, or would you like to write it down?
No, it's not an open officer.
Okay. Can you write the name down for us, please?
The
officer that you spoke to.
Would you like me to write this?
Thank you. And how did you feel about having reported on that?
I think I recall describing it to him as an absolutely horrendous moment. That to see two parents who were clearly in pain and had been hurt by the experience of the loss of their daughter.
And did you give any thought to how they might feel knowing that there was an undercover officer in their midst?
I think if they'd known, they would have been absolutely appalled.
And did you raise that point with the officer that you spoke to?
No, I think that what I spoke about was how I'd felt about having to attend.
And did you think about raising anything with management about that?
No, because
and whether it was appropriate?
Because I'd put the reporting in, so therefore my expectation would have been if there were any questions or problems, they would have come back to me.
If you felt there were any problems with the scope of your reporting, did you feel that you could query that and raise the issue with management to see that you were on track in terms of your deployment?
Well, I think my expectation was that I provided the information, and then if there were any issues or questions that then arose, they would then bring them up with me, if you like, for discussion.
As a holder of the Independent Office of Constable, though, it's right, isn't it, that you should feel that, or you believe that you are right in your own actions and that you have authority in your own actions and not just take direction from your line managers?
There is certainly an expectation of independence on the part of officers. It's a separate question as to how that actually operates in the real world.
And in terms of the real world, you didn't feel that it was your role to raise any issues about appropriateness?
At the time, I would have seen this as being me reporting on something that was necessarily linked to the ISM.
Can we have up on screen, please, MPS 0042-118. It's behind tab C18. And this is in relation to an ISM activist who claims to have been in contact with extremists. And presumably this is, when you heard this, was this exactly the sort of thing that you thought you were in the field to discover?
Well, no, because my issue here is the fact that the title there, activist claims to have been in contact with an extremist. I'm not certain I wrote that. And also, if you look at the main body of the report, there is no mention, as far as I can see, of the word extremist.
Okay, it's in relation to Asif Mohammed Hanif and Omar Khan Sharif and their involvement in an incident in Palestine in 2003. So this is a couple of years before your report here. And we know that those two were, well, one was a suicide bomber, one was an attempted suicide bomber in relation to an event in Gaza. Can we bring up, please, UCPI 39734. It's behind tab B133. This is in bundle 4. And this is a BBC article written at the time. And if we look in particular at paragraph 1, you can see that it relates to two Britons allegedly seen visiting a Gaza apartment belonging to a pro-Palestinian group 5 days before the attack. Raphael Cohen is an activist who you report on quite extensively as part of your operation. And he says that he spoke to the pair for about 15 minutes on the 25th of April. And if we go on to paragraph 12, please. He says that he did ask them, who are you and what organisation do you belong to? And they said they didn't belong to any organisation, but he didn't form any impression of them. And after about a 15-minute chat, the group went to lay flowers at a nearby site where Rachel Corrie had been killed, and then went their separate ways. And several days later, they obviously performed the act of terrorism, one of them dying in the event and the other one being found a couple of weeks later dead. So in terms of that, obviously this is something that was a quite a high-profile event at the time. BBC reported on it. ISM activist quite open about his involvement with the two people who travelled there, the two Britons, and no connection with ISM beyond the cup of tea and them attending the vigil.
Well, that's what's reported here. Whether
Yeah.
that's true or not is a separate question.
Did you do any research or ask anybody about any further information on this?
Not that I recall, no.
Would it be fair to say that the inference would be that that the security service would have known all about this and done particular research,
You would have to ask them.
and that there was nothing really that you could add to what they already knew from 2 years ago?
I think that the fact of the matter is that it's information and it might still be of value. Suicide bomber. That's worth remembering.
It is, and presumably that was what you thought at the time was quite a big thing, and that was almost justification for your deployment. Was that the sense that you had, and that's why it was reported?
No, as I said to you, there's a link here that appears to be with ISM, so therefore I would have reported it. In the intelligence report, I'm really reporting something that I've become aware of.
Notwithstanding that it's 2 years down the line and something might have been done in the intervening period by security services.
Possibly.
Can we have up MPS 004? MPS 004 3231, please. A report of the 6th of May 2005, behind tab C22. This is about war on want, having closer contact with ISM. This is again in particular in relation to the Caterpillar protests and the protest that would be held in the John Lewis department store. I'll give you a moment to read that.
Okay.
So again, because of Caterpillar's involvement in activities in Israel, stockists of the brand became a bit of a target for protest, and that's what you're reporting on here, is that right?
That would appear to be the case, yes.
And was it important for you to be able to report on events that may impact on businesses? Or is it simply because it involves ISM?
It's because it involves ISM, and it's in terms of trying to understand the direction of the group.
Next report, MPS 006 2335, please. And this is, again, an example of your raw reporting. And we can see that...
Sorry, you say that, but this is not signed by me, is it?
It's not signed by you. Are you saying that you didn't write your reports up like this?
What I'm saying is I can't say with absolute certainty that I wrote this report.
Okay. Did you used to type them?
Handwrite and type.
Handwrite and type. And would you generally sign them at the bottom?
Potentially.
Does this sort of reporting, does it seem familiar to you in terms of the font and the layout?
Well, it's less about that and more about the content, clearly.
And is this content the sort of content that you would report?
I would say so, yes.
Having looked at this, moving on to page 2 as well, please. Generally reporting here in relation to ISM people going out to the occupied territories, attending there. first paragraph on this page, we can see there's going to be a cantata for Rachel Corrie, held at the Hackney Empire, and in an effort to raise some money. Jeremy Corbyn was involved in this event as well, is that right?
I can't confirm that.
Can we have a look at the
Is there other reporting that contains that information?
page? Yeah, paragraph 4, just below. And it appears that this is the sort of report, this is the report that was made into a sanitised report later on.
Okay.
Potentially powerful and influential friends. Is that a reference to Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, that looks like that's obviously comment, and Corbyn certainly would have been considered by members of the ISM to be someone worth having links to or with.
Okay. And again, that was seen as important.
As part of the general context intelligence picture of ISM, yes.
Page 3 of this report, please. Paragraph 1 relates to a Palestinian male who's been redacted as privacy. Lives in a large warehouse where he usually shares, which he usually shares with Raphael Cohen. It goes on to say that there's reference to 2 of his immediate family being involved in suicide attacks against Israeli civilians. One of those was his cousin, the other his brother, and apparently one of those was motivated to attack the Israelis because of the death of his cousin. So again, you've got this reference to a suicide bomber, and obviously that sparks or triggers interest in your view.
And the fact that obviously he's obviously has a relationship with Raphael Cohen.
In terms of this particular person, was there any suggestion that he himself was of any threat or danger to the UK?
I wouldn't be able to say. That would have been something that would have had to have been investigated by either special branch or other agencies.
And did you have any sense of whether other agencies were already looking at this person?
Well, at the time, you asked me earlier today, you asked, was I aware that my reports had been passed on to the security services, and I obviously wasn't. It's quite possible they may have undertaken their own research once this information had been put into the system.
Had this person been known to security service, would you have expected to have been told about that or targeted to find out more information about him? Or
to be fair, I don't understand or know how the security services operate, so I can't therefore comment on their modus operandi.
And is it right that you weren't asked to delve any deeper into this person's
I don't recall receiving a specific task in. I then just continued to then report on him, so that gathering further information to help in the identification of who he was and what he might be about.
In terms of the rest of this page, we can see that you do set out in some detail information about his family life and his immediate family. Did your reporting on him go beyond this, or this is the end point of your reporting on this person?
I'm not certain. I would have to see my intelligence reports in their entirety and then check that name against what I submitted. But clearly this has been presented and submitted by me to provide further context to help understand who this individual was, what his intentions may or may not be while he's in the UK.
As far as you can recall, was this any significant person that you were targeted against?
Not that I'm aware of.
Instead, you continued with your primary targets, those being...
Well, looking back at this, I would say that I picked him up and identified him because of the relationship that he had with Charlotte and also Raphael. There was clearly a strong relationship that involved this individual.
Can we have up on screen, please, MPS 0062497? this individual, MCD, a member of ISM, it's negative reporting in terms of intelligence about them not attending the G8 summit and instead would be handing out flyers at Hyde Park on Saturday, the 2nd of July, in relation to a concert. Was that seen as non-intel that was just as useful as positive intel?
Well, there's a difference between positive intel and non-intel, so I would say that it's intelligence.
So any intelligence is good intelligence?
In this instance, it clearly identifies the fact that this individual will not be travelling to Scotland, where at the time, I believe, they were expecting potential public order disorder because of the event that was taking place up there.
We have a couple of reports. I don't think I need to bring them up on screen. The first one is that Atif Chowdhury attended at Glastonbury with friends. That's behind tab C27. And behind C28, the fact that Atif Chowdhury also planned to participate in G8 activities. Again, fairly legitimate activities on the part of Atif Chowdhury.
But of interest to the special branch to understand what this man was about, what he was doing, and potentially his movements.
And somebody who goes to Glastonbury and spends time there, that's just his general socialising, isn't it?
Well, I certainly want to attend Glastonbury. What I would say here is that it's part of understanding who this individual is.
Next report, MPS 006 2505. Um, 28th of June 2005. MPS 006 2502. Behind tab C29. Plans of ISM to go up to the G8 Scotland event. The reference here to the travel arrangements, was that of particular interest as opposed to just activities at the G8 and planned disorder?
This would have been part of understanding the activists that I was reporting on. If they had indicated they would be travelling to Scotland, then clearly that would be of interest to Special Branch.
Can we look at page 2, please? There's reference in the comments section to the minibus being driven by Emily Apple, described as a leading light in the Disarm DSCI campaign. Was she a target at that time, a known target for you to report on?
No, Emily Apple was not a target, a specific target for me during my deployment.
Was she somebody that became known to you through discussions at the SDS meetings?
No, I certainly knew of the name Emily Apple prior to being deployed within SDS.
And so her name coming up in discussion, would that be something that you would immediately think needs to be reported?
If that name had come up and it was most certainly related to her, then yes, I would have reported it.
She's noted as having a file in the research section. Did you read her file?
No, I don't recall doing so.
Can we have up, please, UCPI 38560, page 44. This is part of an exhibit that has been provided to the inquiry by Asa Winstanley, and it is an email from you to Red Room. Is Red Room one of the forums that you were a part of in your capacity as an ISM member?
I don't recall.
rspharrison@yahoo.co.uk, was that one of the email addresses that you used?
I believe that was an email address that was specifically linked to my activities with ISM.
Okay. And Asa Winstanley, he was somebody that you knew as a member of ISM, is that right?
Yes, I met Asa as part of him being part of or associated with ISM.
So this is June 2005, and it looks like you're providing a draft document as to the general principles of ISM. Do you recall writing that email?
No.
It appears that what is being set out is a draft mandate, or if you like, or a set of principles to guide ISM as a group. Would you have been somebody in a position to try to formalise this if there wasn't already a document like this in existence?
What do you mean by formalise?
And put something down in writing and make it a proper draft document.
Potentially, this appears to be a draft of some kind, but in terms of, if you're asking whether I would have had the final say on whether this was or was not accepted by the group, then clearly that's not the case, as appears to be suggested by the opening to the email.
Sorry, you say it's not accepted by the group?
As promised, here's the start of the draft document. It's a draft document and clearly part of some kind of conversation that appears to be taking place between myself and Asa.
Yeah. So were you involved in drafting the principles for ISM?
It would appear that I appear to have been involved in the drafting of this document.
And would that be because there wasn't a formalised set of principles for ISM at this time?
Or perhaps this was being used to replace it.
Paragraphs 2 and 3, about halfway down the page, if we can have a look at those, please. In terms of the principles that are set out there, I'll give you a moment to have a look at them.
Okay.
Would you say that it was clear by this time that ISM had no interest in violence or terrorism as a group?
That appears to be a clear statement of that, yes.
And in fact, none of your reporting focused on Islamic terrorism in the UK or the views of ISM London members regarding Islamic terrorism as a goal or objective, say for the reports to do with suicide bombers from previously.
Well, as I said, if I would have discovered something, I would have reported it. The question remains, though, as to you have to be available in order to discover something, in order to report it.
Was it open to you to be in the group, just not reporting anything that didn't at least meet a basic level of interest to Special Branch?
Possibly, but I reported everything.
Can I ask you about the campaign for Jean-Charles de Menezes?
Of course.
MPS 07-48828, please. This is in relation to Alistair, involved in the current political campaign centred around the death of Jean-Charles de Menezes, and then his details. It's described as a political campaign by you. Did you recognise that perhaps it would be more accurate to call it a justice campaign?
The first thing I would say, of course, is did I write involved with the political campaign arising from the death of Jean-Charles de Menezes? But certainly the main body of the intelligence appears to be something that I would have provided.
Was it your sense that the SDS saw it as a political campaign? Was it discussed by people in the SDS?
Not that I recall.
Was there any discussion about his death in the SDS at the time?
No, but I certainly recall the fact that I attended a meeting that was held at LSC, which is something perhaps you will touch upon. Yeah. And subsequent to that, there was a discussion. I was told not to report on them in any way, shape or form.
Sorry, bear with me one moment. Yeah, we can bring that reference up. It's at MPS 0722 169. behind tab B82 in bundle 3. And if we go down to the entry of April 2007 in this document, this appears to be a note or a diary of your deployment, drafted by HN30, who is one of your cover officers, I think. Is that right?
I'll have to just check if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, if we can go up. This is a document from 10th of April 2007, and it's the note, a special note at 11th of October 2005. So if we can scroll up. Sorry, I haven't made a note of page reference. Next page. Yes, at the top of this page, we can see there's a special note of the 11th of the 10th, 2005 concerning the Jean Charles de Menezes campaign. And CW has been instructed not to seek out nor to place themselves in a position where they will have access to legally privileged or confidential material. Is that what you're referring to, that's an instruction to you?
I recall, and I don't believe it was HN30 who would have instructed me, not to report on the Menezes campaign. It wasn't a case of not to place themselves in a position where they will have access to legally privileged or confidential material. And again, I didn't write this report.
Okay, but it'll be appreciated that is quite different to not reporting on the campaign at all.
Clearly there's a difference there, but I can only tell you what I was told.
The reference you made to the campaign, the public meeting at the LSE, that is a report that you made on the 11th of October 2005, MPS 064162. So a report of the same date as this special note, MPS 064162, behind tab C41. So we can see here this is a meeting that was held on the Monday, so the day before. Public meeting at the LSE, 300 people attending, and you've listed the people there that have spoken at the event. If we scroll down, please. Just general question, there was no disorder at this event, is that right?
Not that I can recall, no.
You mention somebody that's been privacied is identified as living with Atif Chowdhury as an ISM activist. And the handler has noted, source has been instructed not to seek out nor place themselves in a position where they will have access to legally privileged or confidential material. So that would appear to be a note of the person who has then
Processed
instructed you.
That appears to be a comment that's been added by whoever processed and was responsible for putting this report together in terms of placing it onto this document.
Okay. And who was it who you thought gave you the instruction not to be involved at all?
Forgive me a moment. HN72.
So that was the DI.
Yes.
And the note that we were looking at just a moment ago was a note by HN30, who was the DS.
Who would have been reporting to that DI?
The sergeant. And it may have been her, it may have been one of the other sergeants who wrote up this report mentioning the reference there in terms of the handler.
Possibly, yes.
But are you saying that the detective inspector told you, don't go anywhere near this campaign, don't report on the campaign?
So I was told that after I'd attended this meeting.
Yeah. And it appears that's when these notes were made as well, the special note on the...
I wouldn't be able to say when those notes were added.
Okay. Did you make a note, or is this just your recollection now, looking back to that time that you were told, do not target the campaign?
I didn't make a note at the time that I'd been instructed not to target the campaign, no.
Is it likely that this note, this contemporaneous note, is more likely to be accurate, that in fact what you were told is just not to have any access to the legally privileged material around the campaign?
No, I have a very clear memory of being told by that particular DI not to engage further with the campaign.
And did you understand that to mean simply not go to any of the campaign meetings, or did that also encompass not reporting on the people who were involved in the campaign?
Primarily it would have been not to go to any of the meetings that may have been held onwards from that point. In terms of the individuals, it seems clear looking at this reporting that one of the individuals who was involved in the organisation, whether true or not, because it's been reported as potentially, I may have continued to report on.
Can we have a look at MPS 0526805, please? Page 13. So this is an update report of your authority, signed by HM53, who is the DI on page 22, on the 1st of September 2005. We can perhaps just go to that. So that was the detective inspector at the time. Could it have been HM53 that spoke to you?
In relation to?
Not reporting on the campaign?
I don't believe so, no, because that particular individual, to the best of my recollection, was not especially involved in the day-to-day operations of the intelligence operations side. This was an individual who was very much concerned with the sort of back office bureaucracy, if you like.
Okay. And I think, to be fair, HM53 was the DI up until September 05, before 72 took over in the October.
Yes, 72 did replace him, yes.
Okay. Can we go to page 16, please? And paragraph 4. This is the operational objectives, and we can see that UCO Commonwealth's position within the organisation, and this is talking about ISM, will also afford an opportunity to gauge and assess any attempt to subvert or hijack the nascent campaign for justice for Jean-Charles de Menezes, the Brazilian man shot dead at Stockwell on the 22nd of July 2005. Did you understand you were supposed to be gauging and assessing any attempt to subvert or hijack the nascent campaign?
Not that I recall, no. As I said, I was told explicitly not to engage with the campaign.
Was there any sense that you could protect it from outside ulterior agents?
I think generally within Special Branch that would have been something perhaps that might have been considered, because there will always be political groups, organisations that will latch onto a particular campaign and will seek to utilise it for their own gain.
Was this seen as something useful that the SDS could provide to Special Branch, a UCO that was there to detect any sense of other political organisations latching onto the campaign, trying to subvert it?
Possibly, but as I've said, I didn't go on to report on that particular campaign.
And that wasn't communicated to you?
No, I was told not to report on the Jean de Menezes campaign, as I've said.
Well, it appears from the contemporaneous documents that you were only told not to view the legally privileged documents?
I didn't write this document, so I can't comment on the veracity of it.
The Met Police were obviously involved directly in the taking of the life of a young Brazilian man. Was there any sense that that could affect the reputation of the Met Police, and you were to assess that, the threat to the reputation of the Metropolitan Police?
I don't think so, no.
Was there any sense that you got that the campaign needed protecting from being subverted?
No, I would have only have been able to come to an opinion on that if I'd been reporting on there, been present to understand the dynamics of the group and identify the individuals who may or may not have been engaging with that group. I wasn't in that position to do so, so therefore I couldn't have possibly have offered a credible view as far as I'm aware. The
individuals that you report on that were involved in the campaign, there are a number of examples of those. We don't have to go to all of them, but did you speak with them about the campaign itself? Were you speaking with individuals about what the campaign was doing?
No, I certainly recall being invited to the first meeting and attending. After that, I can't recall at this moment any particular conversations regarding the campaign with those individuals. Although, again, I haven't got all of the reporting in front of me.
Can we turn to page 23 of this document, please? We can see that the customer squad comments, so this is C squad, signed off by TN24 on the 7th of September, but halfway down paragraph 1, it says, following the shooting, a number of groups have sought to make political capital out of the tragedy through attacking the police and government policy on Iraq. Was that something that you were aware of? Was that something that...
I didn't write this document, so I can't comment.
And your evidence is that this was never discussed in the group meetings at the SDS?
I don't recall it being discussed within the meetings of the SDS.
Although not reporting on the campaign itself or any meetings of the campaign beyond that first one at the LSE, were you nonetheless still looking to report on those who had some involvement?
I may possibly have reported on them, but perhaps my primary reason for doing so would have been the fact they'd crossed my radar, not the fact they were involved necessarily with the John G. de Menezes campaign.
Patricia Armani de Silva, in her witness statement at paragraph 1.42, I don't need to go to it, but she says that the family organised a fundraiser party with the Peace Not War collective at Jam in Brixton. Yasmin Khan, Asad Rahman and another privacy person were there and arranged the DJ. Were you involved in that fundraiser at all?
I can't recall.
Patricia Armani de Silva, in her witness statement, Jean-Charles de Menezes' cousin, she gave evidence to this inquiry. She says in her witness statement at paragraph 2.68 that I believe HN18 had infiltrated a particular event or incident or access for reporting specifically about these campaigns and these campaigners on the 18th of April. Assad was one of the founders of the campaign. He was very important to us at the time. He never left our side, helping us with everything. I find it very intrusive. The SDS took his personal email address to monitor him and us. And in that, she is referring to a document, MPS 00-65523, which is behind tab C58, where you've reported on Assad Rehman and the email address that he was using. Did you supply that because you thought the email address might be used to see what the campaign was doing?
No, I think I would have reported this because of Assad Rehman, who was known to be an activist.
Did you check his file?
No, I don't recall doing so.
So, although you say you reported Assad Rehman because he was an activist, you're making the specific link with Jean-Charles de Menezes. You're reporting on him. He's an activist working within the campaign. Was that something you wanted to flag to Special Branch?
So the point of that report appears to be flagging the fact that Assad Rehman may have a link to this campaign, not on the direction of the campaign itself.
Okay.
Rehman is the important part of that document.
But it's his tie with the campaign that was important to you. Is that fair?
It's him as an individual.
But his activism, his support of the Jean-Charles de Menezes campaign, why was that important? Why has that made its way into a report?
It clearly appears to be a statement that in some way there was a link there, but as I made clear to you, Rehman was the point of interest there.
Okay, but why is that important? If you've been told don't report on the campaign at all in the year before, in 2005, why are you putting the name of the campaign in your reports?
What they would have said if I hadn't included it? If that was a fact and I've reported that as that's something that's true, then I would report that as true. Rehman is the point of interest here, not the Justice for Jean campaign. Rehman would have been involved in other things as a political activist. He's the point of interest.
Okay. And can you understand the upset that has been caused by this reporting on the campaign in SDS reports?
Well, in the same way that with, I think the loss of a son or a cousin or a daughter, of course, is going to be incredibly traumatic. So, yes, I have sympathy with how that might be interpreted, the reporting might be interpreted.
And did you understand at the time that the campaign was to find out the truth about Jean-Charles's death, to bring those responsible for his death to justice, and to campaign to end the shoot-to-kill policy as it was understood at the time?
I can't recall.
And in that sense, is it fair to say that the campaign didn't fall within your supposed remit of reporting on Islamic terrorism or anarchist crime or disorder?
No, that's fair. That's a fair comment.
And so does it really not serve any purpose to put it into one of your SDS reports?
No, I think it does serve a purpose, and the purpose is very much concentrated and centred on Assad Rehman as a political activist who was known to Special Branch.
MPS 00-65545, please. Behind tab C59. Now, can we tell him what's underneath the privacy? Just to know the name that's under this privacy redaction, I'm just going to give you a reference on the cipher list in front of you. It's not the officer one, but the civilian cipher list. If you look at item 15 on that document,
Yeah.
do you recognise that name?
I do, yes.
And was there any reason to be reporting on him other than his involvement in the Justice for John campaign?
Well, he was also a very close associate to Atif Chowdhury and lived in the same co-op.
There is a report where you note that he lived in the same co-op as Atif Chowdhury, but interestingly about this report is that his involvement with the campaign. What was the point of interest about his involvement with the campaign, and why was that in a report?
It's not. The point of interest is that name, the name of the individual, and the fact that they are linked to Atif, and obviously Atif is part of ISM, so it's part of there's a relational structure there at play, and that's what I would have been reporting on. The Justice for Jean campaign would not have been my primary objective, as I've already made clear.
Would it have been in your mind that this person is linked to Atif Chowdhury and therefore might be trying to undermine the campaign for John Charles?
No, it would have simply been this individual is linked to Atif Chowdhury.
So there's no reason why the campaign appears in the report then?
But it's a fact that if I've said he was involved with it, then that's a fact.
Can we have a look at MPS 0526935? It's behind tab B54 in bundle 3. It's there is reference to if I can take that down, please, and go instead to UCPI 38358. Please, this is an exhibit. Now, this is in relation to your postings as Boogie Boy, or a blog as Boogie Boy. Do you recall?
I recall
blogging.
I recall
in that
posting
identity
on that particular forum. Yes.
Okay. And do you recall blogging in relation to the meeting?
Yes.
The open meeting at the
Yes.
LSE. And do you recall making a comment on page 4, please? We can see here, Big Green B, Boogie Boy, this is your entry in relation to this thread. And you're responding in the to the box, the greyed box. Reference is made in that grey box to the amount charged to the campaign for the use of the LSE room. And you say that that was a fucking disgrace. What do they think was going to happen? Did they think that there was going to be a riot and someone from the LSE should be called to account? Blogging about that meeting, was that something that you understood you had authority to do?
Yes.
And clearly you didn't think there was going to be a riot, there was going to be no public order in relation to that.
Well, I don't know if you can say that. The fact is, this is obviously being posted within the persona of Boogie Boy, Rob Harrison. So therefore, that comment is being pasted within the context of the website and also the discussion that would have been taking place. So I would not obviously have gone on there and made and presented my own opinion.
So this is in your cover identity?
Within the context of my cover identity, maintaining cover, building that sense of who this individual is in relation to other people.
And can we have a look then at UCPI 38360? This is Exhibit 13 to Patricia Armani de Silva's witness statement at page 2, please. Is this page 2? If we can scroll down, perhaps the next page. Yes. The green B, please. Now, this is sometime later on the 15th of January 2006. where you make a post in relation to discussion about the killing, and you say at the very last part of your entry, if this was indeed the case, this leads me to suggest that Mr. de Menezes was dead before he actually entered the station. Commenting on the nature of the event and the killing of Jean-Charles, was that something that you felt was within your scope of deployment, that you could do
Yes.
that because it was in your cover identity?
Yes, within the context of maintaining the legend, building credibility, being in a particular space. It's highly unlikely that I would have posted on there a comment that was supportive of the Metropolitan Police.
What was the purpose of doing that, though?
To maintain the legend, the persona that existed on Urban 75.
Page 7, please. It's the one just above BB, Boogie Boy. And again, you say, I find it hard to believe that a senior officer would not have been involved in the process of surveillance and in the consideration of the implementation of a shoot-to-kill action. So again, commenting on the death, did you consider the appropriateness of you doing that as a police officer?
No, I saw it very much as being part of maintaining that persona within that space.
Given that you were still a police officer and bound by the codes of conduct of a police officer in the undercover capacity, did you give any consideration as to your actions and the appropriateness of that at all?
In relation to this, no.
Did you give any consideration to what the family might think if they were to find out that an undercover officer had been posting
No.
in this way? And was it your sense that on these forums you could say whatever you wanted to, no matter how extreme, so long as it was in the identity of your cover persona?
As long as within on the various fora that existed, I would be able to post within the persona that I had, yes.
And can you understand how family members would be very upset now that this has been discovered about an undercover police officer posting in this way?
Absolutely, yes.
Going back, in fact, now is probably a good time for a break.
Yes,
So-
I think it would. 10 minutes? 10 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hastings, we looked at one document before the break, and that was a raw report, if you like, a typed up document that addressed a number of different reports that would later be made into separate sanitised reports. And you queried whether that may have been something that you authored. And in the break, we've been able to check the metadata, and it does say that the author was Robert Hastings. Does that help you recall whether you were the author of that report?
If that's what the metadata says, then yes, I have to accept that.
Thank you. In the chronology now then, in terms of your reporting, where in August 2005, so for reporting on Jean-Charles de Menezes, we took the scope of the reporting beyond autumn of 2005, just for the sake of keeping that topic together. But I'd like to go back now to 30th of August 2005, MPS 0063026 is behind tab C32 of the bundle, volume 4. And this is a report specifically on Atif Chowdhury. And you describe him as an activist involved with the ISM. It's right, isn't it, that the ISM was an international movement that had been established for quite some time. And it was actually the London ISM that Atif Chowdhury was a part of. Is that right?
Well, he was certainly based in London.
Okay. And is it right that globally there were different ISM groups?
My understanding would be that perhaps if you think of them as cells, who would have been involved in different locations.
Okay. In terms of the London group, Atif Chowdhury had been a part of it. By the time you're reporting now in August 2005, he hadn't been very active at all in the group, save for fundraising events. Is that fair to say?
I would say I've reported this again because of the link to ISM.
But in terms of his activity, is it right to say that he wasn't really active within the group, save for fundraising?
Well, I would have to survey all the information that I'd provided and made available in order to provide you with a view on that.
His predominant activity is the management of Zaytoun, the business that he had set up to import Palestinian goods. Is that right?
He was certainly involved with that, yes.
And you say that he lived in a 4-bedroom premises. You call it a collective, but is it fair to say that it's actually more of a cooperative?
I think that would be a fair description.
And it's really a type of premises where it's multiple occupancy, and it's about, I think Mr. Chowdhury described it as trying to build more of a community around housing, but it's not a collective as one would imagine it to be.
I think that would be a fair description.
Nothing at all suspicious about that housing setup?
Well, looking at this report, this is about, again, painting in the details, providing further information in terms of the individual.
Having reported on him over the period of a year or so, or probably about 6 months, had you got a sense of what he was involved with and how he spent his time, a really good sense of that?
No, I think, as I said earlier to you, the point was to maintain that brief, the watching brief, in regard to the individual and the organisation.
By this time, had you started spending a lot of time with him socially?
We were certainly spending time socially together, yes.
And would you attend at his house often unannounced?
Yes, he would invite me over, and other times I would turn up and we would just spend time together.
did it get to the stage that you were attending almost every other day?
I don't know if it was that frequent, but certainly he and I developed what I think we would describe as a close friendship.
In terms of that close friendship, it wasn't a genuine friendship, was it?
I don't know. I remain conflicted about that as a question.
And is that because he didn't really know who or what you were?
No, on my feelings towards it as an individual. Atif, one of the ways I've described Atif is in a entirely different setting. I can absolutely see that Atif and I would have been extraordinarily close friends. And that's much to my regret that I met this individual in the context in which I did and hadn't met him outside of that.
If you were close with him, did you understand that actually he wasn't involved in anything that Special Branch could possibly be interested in? Again,
I make the point, he was part of ISM. This was stuff that I was reporting back. It's for them to make a decision in terms of what was and wasn't needed or required.
ISM is a movement you could have carried on reporting on without reporting on Atif Chowdhury, is that right?
Well, at the same time, you have to think that I embedded myself. It was part of my legend. It would be very strange if I just suddenly said to Atif one day, well, I'm sorry, you're not going to see me ever again, and disappear off.
Is that in large part because you'd inveigled yourself so closely within his private life?
I think there are two things in operation there. There's a genuine friendship that I felt for him and the need to report on him.
That you need to report on him, do you say?
He's part of ISM, so yes, I'll be reporting on him.
And in terms of the ethical element of that, did you have doubts as to whether you should be reporting on him?
Not at the time, no.
And why was that?
Because I saw my role as to report. I was a special branch officer deployed within SDS. My role was to gather as much intelligence as possible.
Can we have a look at MPS 0063027, please? It's a report of the same date behind tab C33. And this is a report on... if you get your privacy cipher list out.
No, I know who it is.
Oh, do you know who it is? Thank you. Again, somebody who's living privacyd out, living as part of, you say, the collective, but living in a house and that same development, is that right?
Well, to use the term that you've used, we'll use that within the cooperative, yes.
And is the purpose of reporting on this person the fact that he lives there and that's where Atif Chowdhury lives?
No, he was a close friend. He and Atif obviously were fairly close. And also I became aware that this individual was very strongly political. And so the question, as I recall, then became for me, what are the politics? What is this guy about? If he's going to Cuba, has he been to Palestine? Has he been to Israel? All those sorts of questions then come up.
Was he a member of ISM?
Well, I would question the use of the word. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. It's not about being a member. It's about being associated. It's not like a left-wing... There are some left-wing organisations, for example, where clearly you would be a member, you would pay a fee, a subscription of some kind. That's not how ISM operated.
Had it become by this stage that you were not only reporting on Atif Chowdhury, but anybody within his private life, that fell, as you understood it, within your remit?
Yes.
And the fact that you say this person was political, you thought that legitimised reporting on that person? Insofar
as there's obviously an ongoing process in trying to discover what this individual is about, what are their interests, where can we locate them within a spectrum of politics, if you like, and what exactly is the link to Atif? Is it just friendship or is there more going on?
Was it your understanding that if somebody is reported on enough times, they'd end up with a file, a special branch file?
Well, no, because I don't know the processes that Special Branch use for a file, but certainly individuals, you're right in pointing out that individuals perhaps for whom there have been a lot of reporting on, not only from SDS but elsewhere, a file perhaps would be opened on them.
And did you recognise that having a special branch file may have implications for somebody's life in other elements, such as work, vetting for other things, travel?
I'm not sure that that's the case, because the question then arises who would have had access to the special branch file.
So you don't accept that having a special branch file opened on you can have some repercussions for that person as an individual?
I make the point that's possible, but the question then follows from that, who is likely or what is likely to have access to a special branch file? We're talking about files that were kept locked away, not easy access, had to be signed for before you took them out to read them. These were not readily available, in my experience.
And was it any consideration that you had that before you get to that stage there ought to be very good reason for somebody having a file?
Perhaps, but the decision as to when to open a file would not have been mine. That would have been made by somebody else.
We know from the evidence of Atif Chowdhury that you were visiting his house often. You recommended people to live in the cooperative when a room became available.
I don't recall that. Is there a report that makes reference to that?
I have it as that this is the person that Atif Chowdhury later came to be married to. Do you remember that?
I know the individual, yes.
So is it right that you recommended that woman to move into the home and that's when they struck up a relationship?
No, I don't recall that, and I think that would have been unlikely because that person was close friend. My understanding was that person was close friends with Charlotte Carson, and they'd known each other previously. So I think it's far more likely that if there was a recommendation, if I didn't make it, it would have come by way of Charlotte.
And as a result of that, she then was reported on by you?
She would have been reported on, yes.
After she moved in, is it right that you visited nearly every day, often without advance notice?
Again, I can't say for certain what the frequency was of my visits to that location.
And is it right that he confided in you often about very deeply personal things about his difficult childhood and his family?
I don't recall that specifically, no, but we were certainly close friends.
When sat there listening to him confide in you about all sorts of different things, did you ever consider that you shouldn't be there as an undercover officer listening to him?
At the time, I wouldn't have done so, no.
You didn't think about
At the time, I wouldn't have done so, no.
the ethics. You met members of his family, is that right?
Yes.
And you DJ'd at his sister's wedding?
I did, yes.
And is that something that you volunteered for? He didn't ask you? You put yourself forward?
As I recall, he asked me to do that. And as I recall, I think it would have been odd if I had chosen not to do that because of the fact he knew me. And within my persona, this was something that was part of what I did.
Could you have come up with a reason for being away at that time?
Possibly, but at the time I didn't. And I decided, and I did it for him as a favour.
You didn't think about the appropriateness of an undercover officer DJing at his sister's wedding?
No, because it was all part of maintaining my legend.
Do you recognise now that the impact of your deployment, the knowledge of that has had a significant effect on Atif Chowdhury, so that all these memories of, him meeting his wife, them getting his partner, them getting together, them having children, his sister's wedding, all of that is now tainted somewhat by the thought of there being an undercover officer in the midst?
I can certainly appreciate that could possibly be the case, yes, of course.
And now, looking back, you recognise that perhaps you shouldn't have been involved so far in his personal life?
I recognise that being a special branch officer working within SDS can have an absolutely catastrophic effect on people's lives, yes, including mine.
Do you think you should have been told about that, trained on that, and instructed not to be so involved in people's personal lives?
I think as we've explored, that wasn't covered, so in retrospect, it would have been very helpful.
Can we have a look, please, at MPS 0064199? It's a report from the 17th of October 2005. It's a fairly extensive report on Atif Chowdhury. It's entitled Antecedent Details, and it talks in some detail about his siblings, including their names, their places of work, how Atif feels about places that they work, the ages of people, where they attend school, where Atif Chowdhury attended university, where he worked, and that the eldest brother works in the Libyan embassy. And the fact that his family originate from Bangladesh. This is all very personal information. To what extent did you think that was important for Special Branch to be aware of a year into your deployment?
At the time, I'd have seen that as very much contributing to the intelligence picture that existed about him and his family.
Was the fact that his family originated from Bangladesh and that his eldest brother worked at the Libyan embassy something that you thought, this is something Special Branch need to be aware of because of the origins, the national origins?
So you're asking me, did I report on this because the fact they came from Bangladesh and that was primarily why I reported it? No, of course not. It was general contextual, it was greater contextual information.
Were you close to him because he was an Asian man with a Muslim background?
No.
And that was why you thought there was an element of Islamic terrorism or fundamentalism, extremism, and that's why you latched onto Atif Chowdhury out of all the people in ISM?
Well, let's break that down. Atif Chowdhury, no. His race or where he came from was of no real consequence to me.
No consequence to you, but you obviously thought it was important for Special Branch to be aware of that.
Yes, as I said,
and
for
why is
context.
That?
For them to understand who the individual is, what they're about.
His ethnic background, his race, had no bearing upon his activities as part of London ISM, did it?
I can only say those details were reported because that is who he is as a person, as an individual. Those are material facts.
Was there any concern about his brother working at the Libyan embassy?
I've clearly reported it, but I can't comment as to whether that was developed or researched or any further work was done on that.
Was there any concern about one of his brothers starting work at the immigration service?
I cannot report on that. I can only say that the information was provided, and if it was developed, it would have been developed by officers in New Scotland Yard.
Did you give any consideration that there might be consequences for those brothers given a report, their inclusion in a Special Branch report?
At the time, no.
And why was that?
Because at the time I saw it, it was my duty to report as much intelligence as possible. So I reported this information back to NSY.
But there was no intelligence, was there, that these brothers had any ulterior motive in terms of their careers?
Well, I can provide the basic facts, and then it may very well be for a New Scotland Yard officer to look at this and to develop it if they think it's appropriate to do so.
We heard evidence from Mr. Chowdhury last week, and he talked about going out to Palestine, standing in line with many other international supporters from ISM, and having the sense that because of his ethnicity, because of his race, he was perhaps targeted by the Israeli soldiers. Are you aware of that?
No.
Sense that he had? And for that reason, he felt that he couldn't be as effective as some of the other white international people who were in the area.
I can't comment on that.
Being back in London, trying to assist with the cause through fundraising to a limited extent, what do you say about him then being targeted by his own police force because of his ethnic background, where he's from, his home, where his brothers work, and his involvement in that way? Does it ring? Does it raise any concerns with you that now he's being targeted and reported on again by his own police force?
No, at the time, no.
Was there a sense that because he was one of the only Asian people within the group, and he was one of the only people with a Muslim background, his heritage, that was the reason why you were reporting on him?
No, I reject that completely.
And why do you reject that?
Because those specifics didn't inform my decision to report on him. It was the fact that he was linked to ISM. I didn't report on him because he was family from Bangladesh, or he was Asian, South Asian. It was the fact that he was a member or associated with ISM.
By the time you come to be reporting on him, he's not even one of the key activists in ISM, is he?
Well, I think he was certainly involved. And the question then becomes, what is his role?
Had you established that fairly early on, though, that he was fairly withdrawn from ISM?
Well, as I said to you earlier, it's a question of a watching brief to determine what people are doing.
His trip out to Palestine, you report on MPS 0064259, and that's on the 31st of October 2005, behind tab C44. Simply reporting that he's gone out there and when he's due back. Any intel that you had about what his activities were when he was out there?
Whatever intelligence I would have had available to me, I would have reported.
And there's a similar report in relation to Asa Winstanley as well. Were you driving them to and from the airport?
I don't recall driving, I could be wrong, but I don't recall driving Atif or Asa to the airport.
Did you regularly drive other London ISM activists to the airport?
No, but I do recall taking an individual to the airport not linked to ISM and picking up an individual and bringing them back to London from an airport.
Is that just at one occasion you say that you did
So
that?
there were two occasions when I recall picking people up, either taking them to an airport or returning them from the airport back to London.
But you're saying you only did that on two occasions?
I can only recollect doing that on two occasions.
Is it likely that you did that more regularly, particularly with ISM or London ISM members?
My recollection is that I didn't, I may be wrong, but to the best of my current recollection, I don't recall taking members of ISM to the airport.
Was your car, was it a car that you had as opposed to a van?
Yes.
Did you use your car for the purposes of the operation to be able
Yes.
to say where people were and where they lived?
Potentially, yes.
And in that way, did you, on the occasions that you say you did take somebody to the airport and pick them up, would that form part of your reporting as to where they were and how long they were going for?
From what I would have known at the time, I would have reported it. And certainly having a vehicle would have enabled that, because a great many of the activists, of course, didn't have access to vehicles, or rather chose not to.
We have another report at MPS 0064486, behind tab C48. It's a report of the 7th of December 2005. This is a list of people that have been privacied out. ISM contacts in 2002 who may have included possible shaheeds. And do you mean martyrs?
Potential martyrs for the cause of Islam.
Okay. And where is that contact list derived from?
I have no idea. I can't remember.
And this is 3 years at least before you're reporting this. Is this an old list? Why is this forming part of your report in 2005?
Looking at this now, I would say it's possible there was an ISM activist who was moving from their home, and they had a lot of material in their house that they couldn't keep there, and they needed it to be kept safe. If this is where that may have come from there, because there was a folder that I provided to Special Branch that had been kept within the general materials that this activist had at their home address.
And how did you come to possess that?
It would have, if that's where it's come from, it would have been because the information would have been drawn from that document.
If it assists, if you look at item 22 on your cipher list, I think it's in relation to the fourth name down. Does that name ring any bells?
Not immediately, no.
Did anything come out of this report at all?
Not that I'm aware. I wouldn't have been told if the report had gone in any subsequent work that would have been undertaken on it. I wouldn't have been told about.
And why would you say that these include possible shaheeds?
I can't comment. I can't recall.
Is this exaggerated reporting?
I'd like to think I didn't exaggerate my recording at any point.
If we can go to page 6 of this document, please. We can see the comment. PIW, what does that stand for?
Could be possibly identical with.
Okay. Suicide bomber in Tel Aviv. Do you have any further details about that?
No.
But it was from a 2002, similar to the previous report, was it, in relation to the 2 bombers in 2003?
It's possible there's an overlap, yes.
And did that have any further interest for you? Did you follow that up in any way?
Follow up?
This report? Try and find out any further information? Did you do any further research yourself?
I wouldn't have undertaken independent research. I would have just reported what I was finding in terms of intelligence. The research, if there was research that was required in regard to this intelligence, it would have been undertaken by Special Branch officers back at the yard.
We have a report of Asif Chowdhury's trip with his mother. It's MPS 0065137. And this is about him going to Libya with his mum, where we know that his brother was working. And his evidence was that it was to go and see his nephew, his birthday. Do you recall that?
No, what I would say is, the information that I had available to me would have been what I would have reported.
So you've reported that he's going to Libya with his mum for about 3 weeks, taken to the airport by his father, and you've noted that that was a small car, and I think that's his reg plate. Given that you've got a report relating to potential shaheeds, and not long after you've got Atif Chowdhury's trip to Libya, are you trying to say that there's something of interest about this trip to Libya?
Not specifically. I'm just merely recording the fact or reporting the fact that Atif would have been travelling to Libya.
But why would that have been of any interest to Special Branch? Would you have been reporting that if he was going to France on holiday?
Likely, yes.
Why?
Because it's about the context, about knowing as much as possible about an individual. Well, it was at the time, I would say.
And reporting on his mother and his father's car and their reg plate. Why would that have been of interest to Special Branch?
As I've said previously, it's about the wider contextual picture that could be drawn up.
And putting it in a wider contextual picture, do you see that there's a danger that actually Atif Chowdhury going on holiday to see his family may well be seen as more sinister than it was a completely innocent trip to go and see his family?
I can only report, as appears to be the case, I can only report on what's available to me at the time.
The nature of your deployment, though, is to try and pick up on serious crime, possible Islamic terrorism, and this is what's going into the reports. Do you see the impact that that may have on Atif Chowdhury and his wider family?
Possibly.
And the fact of their heritage, the fact of the country that they're going to, do you recognise that that could have an impact on both him and his wider family?
I recognise the fact of there being potential.
And so were you not, you're the person who's on the ground, you're the person that's spending hours with Atif Chowdhury. Were you not the person to filter out the information that actually was of no interest to Special Branch, as opposed to leaving it to members of your management who didn't know him?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily have been the management. It would have been the research work and related work would have been undertaken, as I said, by Special Branch officers who would have undertaken further research if that's required. I provided the raw data. It was for them to make decisions in terms of whether they, to use your terminology, you say whether this was sinister or not. They would have had to have had a look at this and then determine whether there's anything there to be developed further.
Were you actually told, Atif Chowdhury's evidence is that he told you that he was going to visit his brother, it was his nephew's birthday, he was very excited. Were you aware of that?
I don't recall that, no.
If you had been told that, is that the sort of thing you would have put in the report, or that would have made you think there's no reason to report this?
No, I think at the time it's highly likely that I would have included all the information that was available to me.
Was reporting on things like this, like the old references to suicide bombers, a way of justifying your deployment with little else to report on?
No, I would never feel the need to justify my deployment. And ultimately, the fact as to whether my deployment continued or not would not have been mine to make. It would have been completely out of my control.
Did you feel that you had to be putting in reports, even though you may not have had an awful lot of material to report on?
No, I never felt compelled that in any way I had to reach a certain number or perform in a particular way in terms of the reporting.
Can we have a look at MPS 0065300, behind tab C52, Volume 4. This is a London ISM action at John Lewis on Oxford Street on the 16th of March 2006. And this is an action where people went into the branch of John Lewis, put on some caterpillar boots and made speeches and caused a fuss.
Are you saying they did that, or because this report seems to be before that, they intend to?
They intend to do that, and I think they did do that ultimately. No intention of causing damage, physical harm. It's a publicity stunt. That kind of small-scale activity, that action, was that something that you thought needed to be brought to the attention of Special Branch because it was going to be something that uniformed police needed to be aware of, or what was the purpose of reporting that?
Just to make them aware of the fact that there was an activity that was likely to take place. And it would be for them, again, this is beforehand, so it would have been developed later on if further information was available in terms of whether the question as to whether police officers need to be deployed, that would have been considered later.
And in terms of the amount of people that were going to be involved in that action, were you aware of that?
No. The comment there, if I wrote it, says, at the moment, the ISM do not know how many they will get to attend.
Was it going to be a small group of people?
I couldn't say.
We're not talking large-scale public order event, though, are we?
Unlikely.
And so would it be the sort of thing that John Lewis Security could manage, with the option of calling for police if they needed any assistance?
Well, in fairness, I can't possibly comment on the capabilities of John Lewis Security.
Okay. But this certainly isn't something where you're going to have public order police thinking, right, well, we need to get police out and deployed, ready to manage some kind of public order event.
I don't know. The question here is to how fluid these things can be. And something might be intended, perhaps, or even advertised as being peaceful, but there's always the possibility that it might not remain so.
Were you of any understanding that John Lewis would be informed of any sort of event like this?
No.
Can we have on screen, please, MPS 0065437? It's behind tab C55, sir, and this is in relation to a report on an individual who is in the process of applying for British naturalisation. And again, this background reporting in relation to somebody seeking naturalisation is purely because they are linked with London ISM, is that right?
Yes, and the apparent intention for them to travel to, well, obviously they have an intention to gain entry to Israel.
And the intention of gaining entry to Israel would be to carry out activity in relation to London ISM?
To carry out some form of political activity.
And if there had been any sense that that was anything unlawful, that would have been part of the report, I take it?
I would have reported what was available to me at the time.
MPS 0065442, please. This is a report on a young woman, aged early 20s, IC4 being?
South Asian, I believe.
And detail about her background, where she spent her childhood, and where she likes, or where she's now living, and travel in relation to the person who vacated that room. Are you reporting on her simply because she lives at the address where Atif Chowdhury lives?
Looking at this, I would say I was likely reporting it because of that. That certainly would have informed part of the reason, but also the fact of Red Pepper, which is a magazine that might be described as leftist.
And that qualified her to then become the subject of a special branch report,
Absolutely,
in your view?
Yes.
Looking at the box on page 2, research box, it's noted that she's unable to identify. Does that mean that you or somebody in back office has done some more research around this woman?
That suggests to me that someone has undertaken some kind of initial work and that there is no current trace of that individual within Special Branch records.
MPS 0065685, please. This is a report of about a month and a half later, 8th of May 2006. It's a further report on the same woman, Atif Chowdhury, and his girlfriend and his business. So again, more reporting around Atif and those who are within his private life. Again, you're saying that that is a legitimate focus of your reporting.
I go back to the point, it's about the wider informational picture.
Can I just ask, in relation to the report on the young South Asian woman, can you look at the cipher list again, please?
Yeah.
And if you look at items 24 and 25,
Yeah.
do you know the person that it has been redacted out, that's been referred to?
In the list here,
Yeah. So the person is that
well,
on the title
that
subject.
report, Atif Chowdhury is considering asking his housemate, and you've got the privacy. That, to my mind, is a person who's named within 24.
Yes, 24 and 25, those were the two reports
Yes.
we've just looked at.
Yeah, there's a female name to that. I think that would be her.
Yeah. And this is not the same person as Maya, is it?
No.
Did you have any romantic dealings with that person?
If you mean did I have sex with that person or any kind of sexual activity, then no, I didn't.
Did you show any sort of sexual attraction towards that person?
There was certainly flirting between the two of us, but that was all it was.
Had you made advances towards that person?
Not that I recall, no.
Had you made advances that she had rejected?
No. She was... no.
Can we go to MPS 0065734, please? Again, further reporting on Atif Chowdhury, his girlfriend, and others at the address. The origin, and it's a national or racial origin of the person at the third line of the report. Why was that of importance?
As I've said previously, the point there is to provide as much information to help identify a particular specific individual.
Was race of a particular interest to you because you were looking for Islamic fundamentalism?
Islam is not a race, it's not a racial system, it's not tied to race, so no.
No, but did you link it with people's race? Was a person's race of interest to you because of the focus of your deployment?
No, specifically race, it was just things that are racial markers identified within a very particular system, were just merely used for the purposes of helping to identify those individuals.
You start reporting on No Borders around this time, spring 2006, as far as we know from the reports that we have at the inquiry. No Borders was a network established in 1999, as we understand, in Europe, opposing immigration controls in Europe. It ran anti-deportation campaigns and raised awareness of conditions in immigration detention. And the London branch began to form from around spring 2005. Is that accurate according to your recollection?
I certainly recall the fact that my involvement with them, at least within the London branch, was probably, they were a fairly nascent group.
So within a year, really, of them starting to form and operate? Possibly.
Without the details in front of me, I couldn't say for certain.
There's a report, MPS 0065740. It's behind tab C65. And this is a report on the No Borders Network presentation of at the cinema in relation to a presentation on poor conditions in detention centres. I'll give you a moment to have a look at that.
Okay, yeah.
So about 15 people attended, and this is a report post the event.
Yeah.
So you will have known that there was no public disorder or criminal interest in this event. Why were you reporting on this small gathering to raise awareness about immigration detention conditions?
Because of the fact I think it was thought of as being, well, there was clearly politics involved there. And I think this would have taken place after there had been an expectation of me to develop further, more widely than ISM.
And given that ISM wasn't a sufficient justification for your deployment around this time, is that fair to say? Is that the impression you were given by management?
Well, I think I would say that, as I've indicated previously, that I was told that the reporting on ISM, they wanted me to expand, to expand really. And to do that, No Borders was identified as being a potential place that I could move across to.
And when you say identified, who identified that? Was that your own identification?
Quite possibly it may have been.
And to what extent, if at all, were SDS management involved in identifying this as a group that there would be special branch interest in?
I can't say for certain the extent to which they were involved, but certainly I recall the reporting sergeant, when I reported back that I was involved with No Borders, that they seemed quite pleased.
So they actually said, yes, this is exactly the sort of thing that we're wanting a bit more information on?
Or rather, that they thought of it as a good move in the context of remaining within activist circles.
And why was that? Did they give a reason?
No.
There's reference to, in paragraph 3 of this report, it looks like a woman, and you describe her in terms of physical appearance, mid to late 30s. You say best described as having a particularly robust figure. Why was that important, and why describe her in that way?
Well, primarily to provide further information that would potentially help special branch officers identify the individual, and a particularly robust figure. You could have said heavy set.
Is this sexist reporting in that it's commenting in a derogatory way in relation to a woman's figure?
I think it's a way, looking at this, it's a way to try and make a comment and provide a description that, if anything, is polite.
You comment on the fact that she has a child and the age of the child. To what extent did you think that was appropriate?
With it, again, as previously described, this would have been information that I would have provided just in terms of helping to identify the individual.
And you say that she's been involved in politically inspired activism for many years. It doesn't talk about a particular type of activism, presumably a lot of activism is politically inspired. Why did that fall within your remit?
Well, the description there is the fact that clearly looks as if it's the first time I'd met this individual, so the terms in which I'm using to describe there are obviously quite generic. So there's scope there for further exploration.
So this is fairly, again, broad approach to a group, trying to see if there's anything of any real value in reporting on them.
Initial stage is identifying individuals and trying to provide as much information to be able to help special branch officers further identify them if need be.
MPS 0065979, please. This is a report from the 5th of May 2006, and it's a list of email addresses.
Yeah.
Can we just have a look at the next page, please? And the next page. So a significant number of email addresses has been provided in this report.
Yeah.
And was it right that you thought that anybody that's engaging with the Rise Up network was worth reporting on, that their details should be?
Were engaging via the Rise Up network with no borders, yes, then I would have reported on them.
Had there been any security around you signing up as part of the Rise Up email distribution list?
I think I mentioned this earlier, that access to it was gained by way of a recommendation from another activist.
Once you're on that emailing list, was it possible that you would be easily deleted if you didn't engage fully with the organisation?
I couldn't say.
Just in terms of the information that was obtainable from an email distribution list like this, is obviously getting information from an email distribution list is a lot less intrusive than having somebody in your home, at parties, social events, at the pub or meetings as an undercover officer.
Certainly, but as an SDS officer, I would have utilised both methods.
And how easy was it for officers to get this type of information? How easy was it for the police to infiltrate a group like this through electronic means as opposed to a physical undercover officer being deployed?
I can't comment on that because I don't know necessarily what tools would have been available to them to do that. As I say, I make the point that my access to this was facilitated through a recommendation by another activist.
So that might be an appropriate point to break for the day.
Certainly. Beginning tomorrow morning, you're going to be asked about a topic that I know is of concern to you, your relationship with Maya and the effect it had on you and on your ex-partner and children. And I want you to be fresh and ready to deal with that, beginning first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you, sir.
May I say something to those at the back of the room, please? Tomorrow's evidence, in particular that which will be given tomorrow morning, must be listened to in strict silence. The interjections this afternoon came at points of lesser importance, but it is very important indeed that this evidence is given without any conceivable interruption, not only to enable the witness to do of his best, but also so that Maya can hear it without interruption. I see a hand raised at the back. A thumb up, thank you. Then please follow that example, and I do urge you to heed my words and allow the evidence to be given uninterrupted. Thank you. Very well, until 10 o'clock tomorrow.